Balake, where's Balake at?
My name's Blake.
Do you want to go to war, Balake? I'm for real. Ron.
Ron is here. Welcome back, everybody, for some more SPTV and what could possibly be more SP than talking about lawsuits against David Miscavige. And that's what we're talking about today. This is the lawsuit. Let me add it to the stream here by Valerie Haney. This is Valerie. Valerie is the one who used to work for Shelly Miscavige and David Miscavige. The headline says here, she escaped in the trunk of a car. Her nightmare is far from over. Many of you who have seen the Leah Remini Scientology in the Aftermath show will probably recognize Valerie's face, her name, and her story. I got to tell you, escaping in the trunk of a car. And this car drove from Gilman Hot Springs, California to Los Angeles. The non-Scientologist whose car she escaped in had no idea she was in the trunk of the car. It's like a 90-minute drive back to LA. Anyway, it's pretty crazy. There's some updates in this case that I haven't reported on really just because there's just so many things I've been wanting to discuss and I just haven't gotten around to this. But some of these developments are covered in this article. And so let's briefly cover some of them. Okay, let's see. There's a lot in this article. We're not even going to try to cover it all. I've already been through it. I know what the highlights are, but it's long, so I'm going to have to scroll through and find the parts. Okay, so let's just see this summary here. In November 2016, I'll make it a little bigger. Haney, who worked casting Scientology's internal films, crawled into the trunk of an actor's car during a film shoot in order to get away from Scientology's secretive international management compound, Gold Base, near Hemet, California. Her unusual escape became the subject of the premiere episode of Leah Remini's third season of Scientology and the Aftermath. Okay, so real quick, one of the main highlights, well, the most important aspects of Valerie's case right now is that the courts have ruled she is not allowed to move forward with her civil lawsuit in the courts. The most horrible thing about this case is that the courts have sided with Scientology, that the arbitration agreements, the arbitration clause in the overall general release and general agreement and release that Valerie signed, that this is a valid, binding contract that was not signed under duress. At least that's the way it stands right now. And so the judge has ordered Valerie to undergo the so-called Scientology internal religious arbitration. Now, there is no such arbitration. This is just something that was made up by David Miscavige and his executive team. It's a myth. It's a fiction to keep Scientologists from being able to sue Scientology. And there's only one case that I know of where this agreement was invalidated. And there's a second one, but it was invalidated for a different reason, so it doesn't really matter. And there is another case currently pending, another civil lawsuit against David Miscavige and a few other Scientology organizations. And this is the Baxter and Paris versus David Miscavige Scientology et al. And that this exact same issue is what is currently being reviewed by a Tampa federal district court. And the argument being made in that case is that these agreements, including the arbitration clause, were signed under duress, and these cases should be allowed to proceed in court. Scientology actually argues that it is the religious arbitration panel that should be the one to decide whether the agreements were signed under duress. Anyway, some crazy stuff. Okay, so that just giving that context will allow us to fast forward through this article a little bit. When Valerie Haney did escape from the Sea organization, she did end up working for Leah Remini as Leah's personal assistant. And that is when Scientology launched an all-out harassment campaign against her. Scrolling through. Oh, yeah. And so sometimes it's easier for me just to explain things than to find it in the article. Once the court said Valerie was going to have to undergo Scientology's internal religious arbitration, and then after the arbitration, they could come back to the court and review everything that had occurred, Valerie asked for Tom Cruise to be one of the 3 Scientologist arbitrators on her arbitration panel. And if Tom Cruise wasn't available, she asked for Shelly Miscavige to be one of the arbitrators. That was after having asked for Elizabeth Moss. Now, Scientology came back and said, Valerie's making a mockery of this process, and she's only selecting these high-profile people so she can leak it to the press, and the press will harass these people. And they asked the judge to just throw the entire thing out. Forget the arbitration, just throw it all out on its face. And the judge said that Valerie had one more opportunity to make a good faith effort to select a Scientologist in good standing to be one of her 3 arbitrators, according to the rules that Scientology made up. And so Valerie put a list of like 15 people together and submitted it to the court. The court submitted that list to Scientology. Scientology said, we have contacted the people on this list, and we have found one person who has agreed to serve as Valerie's arbitrator. And we've selected a second, and those 2 have selected a third. But we refuse to provide the names of the arbitrators. We refuse to tell the court and Valerie which one of the people she requested has accepted. This is how messed up these guys are. All right. So, and later on in this article, it's going to list some of the people who are on that list. And that's one of the things I wanted to share with you guys. Okay. Not that. Some lurid details about David and Shelly. There's Scientology's boss baby right there. Hey guys, don't forget. Hold on, let me show you. This is my gratuitous David Miscavige shaming. This is my life-size David Miscavige vintage plush doll. I mean, the similarities are canny. Can you believe it? Actually, life-size. Very rare. Very rare. Okay. Oh, boy. All right, let's see. Oh, and okay, so guys, this is actually one of the reasons, one of the things that gives Scientology's argument a little bit of teeth in the eyes of the eyes of the court. So look, after emerging from the trunk, Valerie immediately went to Burbank Airport and flew to Portland, Oregon to be reunited with his father. But as a Scientologist, he was unhappy that his daughter had escaped the way that she did. And he encouraged her to return, to route out properly, or following a prescribed set of steps before being allowed to leave. This really does kind of put the judge in a tough spot. How many times can a person sign a document and still be able to claim that it was under duress? This is where Scientology has sort of put its ducks in a row in a way that allows it to really fool the legal system, fool the courts. The courts don't seem to be able, they don't seem to have anything baked into the process that allows for, I want to say the mental conditioning, just because I don't like the word brainwashing, the mental conditioning that exists in a cult like Scientology. They either don't seem to understand it, or they don't have the latitude, the freedom to incorporate that understanding. I'm not really sure which one it is, to be honest. But so, for example, she says here, she describes what she had to undergo to do that routing out properly. Routing out properly basically means leaving on Scientology's terms, not on your own terms. So Valerie refused to go back to the Gold Base. That's another name for the International Management Base, because the Golden Era Productions is a movie studio that's located on the International Management Base. So sometimes it's just called Gold, or the Gold Base. Okay, Valerie refused to go back to the Gold Base where she had escaped, but she agreed to go through the routing out process at Scientology headquarters in Los Angeles, which she was told would last 3 weeks. Instead, it lasted 3 months. And she says that she was treated like a prisoner with a 24-hour guard. She was not allowed to go to her grandmother's funeral at this time. Finally, she was asked to be videotaped signing an agreement in order to leave. In the video, she denied that she had been treated poorly as a Sea Org worker, and she said that David Miscavige had been an amazing boss. Okay, now, anyone who's experienced this routing out process in the Sea organization, as did I, knows you would literally say, do, sign anything to be allowed to leave. Now, Scientology wants to make the argument that it doesn't count as duress if the only thing you're being threatened with is expulsion from a religious group. It doesn't count as duress if what you're afraid of is your friends and family disconnecting from you because they're Scientologists and are following the rules of Scientology. Scientology's argument is duress is a very, very specific thing, and abiding by the rules you've already previously agreed to abide by or else does not count as duress. In a certain way, I can understand where the court is put in a tough position. How do you prove it's duress if you went back, agreed to undergo their process, agreed to do the sec check, agreed to sign the document, did it all on video, so that you could continue to be a Scientologist, so that your friends and family wouldn't disconnect from you? I mean, personally, my bias is that I wish the courts understood and had the freedom and the latitude to find in favor of the former Scientologists who have been subjected to this and are now being bound by these agreements that, well, it really just comes down to how you define duress. It really just comes down to how you define duress and how the courts define duress. That is really what all of this comes down to. All right, let's see how it goes on here. So she took the job with Leah Remini, the TV show, lawsuits, the earlier arbitration case, libel, the other trafficking case I just mentioned, David Miscavige. No, that's not what I'm looking for here. Okay, we're talking about Elizabeth Moss. Okay. Then we're going to get down to Tom Cruise and Shelly Miscavige. We covered that. Some gratuitous details about Tom Cruise's birthday party. Don't need to cover that. Okay, yeah. Okay, so here's where we get to the 15 people that Valerie Haney nominated. Scientology was all freaking out that, Valerie's just nominating famous people to get headlines. And Valerie's attorney pointed out that Scientology is asking Valerie to nominate Scientologists who are in good standing because those are the only people who are eligible, according to Scientology's rules, to serve on the arbitration panel. And Valerie's attorney argued, how in the world is Valerie Haney supposed to know who's still in good standing when Scientologists in good standing aren't even allowed to talk to her? She's not allowed to reach out to people she knew in Scientology to ask them if they're still in good standing. And Scientologists are, leaving Scientology like rats on a sinking ship. How is she supposed to know? So one of the easiest ways for Valerie to know that she's actually nominating someone who is in good standing is to nominate a person who's publicly known to still be a Scientologist. And that's an argument that makes fantastic sense. So let's check out. Okay, so it goes on here. Haney submitted another 15 names of Scientologists, many of them very well known, others more familiar to readers of Scientology news stories. Okay. So check this out, guys. She decided that figures like actors Jenna Elfman, Giovanni Ribisi, Catherine Bell, designer Rebecca Minkoff, motivational speaker Grant Cardone, prominent attorney and husband of Greta Van Susteren, John Cole, were more likely to be in the church's good graces. Based on her internet searches, Haney had also gone to school with Minkoff, and she'd had a conversation with Elfman. Matt Feshbach, it was another person who was on the list, was the first $1 million donor in Scientology history. Haney says that she added his name to the list because she had known him and his son while she was in the Sea Org. Jessica Feshbach is another person she nominated, who was known for being Katie Holmes' aggressive media handler while the actress was with Cruise. Okay. Bob Duggan is a famous guy in the pharma sector. She put Bob Duggan is probably one of the probably the only actual billionaire Scientologist. I know Grant Cardone pretends that he's a billionaire, but everybody knows he's not really a billionaire. Valerie added Bob Duggan's name because she saw him at Scientology events, and by his own estimate has contributed more than $300 million to Scientology. Valerie says that David Miscavige has a list of all the millionaires in Scientology, and Bob Duggan and tech entrepreneur Craig Jensen, the founder of Disckeeper, were both on Miscavige's list. That's right. Craig Jensen was another person who she nominated. Okay. Okay, they don't name that person. All right. So then it goes on to explain that Scientology is refusing to release the names of the arbitrators, even to Valerie. So check this out. This is another reason, another thing I really wanted to highlight here. At the hearing on March 15th, Valerie's attorney, Granberry, asked the judge to order Scientology to allow Valerie to bring a lawyer with her, a friend, and a court reporter who could also videotape the arbitration. The judge refused. The judge set a hearing for 6 months out to consider the result of the arbitration. She admitted that she did not know what rules Scientology had set up for the arbitration, but what mattered were the rules of the arbitral forum. In other words, Scientology sets all the rules. This is one of those things that just defies any logic or common sense. Valerie Haney is not allowed to in any way document or record the proceedings of the arbitration, but will still have to go back to the court after the arbitration to make an argument to the court that the entire proceeding was unfair and prejudiced against her. How in the world is she supposed to do that if she's not allowed to have a lawyer present, to make an audio recording, to make a video recording? Nothing. And this is common for justice proceedings in Scientology. One of the main and most common justice proceeding in Scientology is called a committee of evidence, or a COMEV. All COMEVs are audio recorded. I remember the last COMEV that I had, though. I was called in for the COMEV. I was searched for recording devices. I was then specifically asked if I was recording the proceeding. I had to say no. And then they said, okay, good. We will be recording the proceeding. And then they pressed record. Now, when that's just being done by Scientology to Scientologists, you can argue that you're consenting to it. But Valerie's not a Scientologist anymore. And she's being ordered by the court to participate in what Scientology says is a religious ritual. And all of her rights and freedoms that should be being afforded to her in the courts are being completely stripped away. And the judge is just sitting there going, nothing I can do. I mean, if I were Valerie, I would actually, I'm saying this, Valerie's getting good legal advice, and I'm not saying I would ignore legal advice, but without knowing exactly what she's being told, I'm just saying, if I were Valerie, I would show up with an attorney and say, I'm sorry, I'm not coming without my attorney. I would make Scientology turn me away. And then I would go back to the court and say, I'm not going in without an attorney. And anyway, what I'm saying could be stupid. I'm just saying it's what I would do. Maybe if I had an attorney advising me, it's not what I would do, but sitting here right now, armchair quarterbacking the whole thing, that's what I would do. This is where you really have to start asking, what in the hell are the courts and the judge thinking? What in the hell are they thinking? I'm thinking they're playing a whole lot of cover your butt, cover your ass. Okay, let's see. It also became obvious that Valerie was not receiving notices about the arbitration because Valerie now lives in Florida and Scientology is still mailing notices to a P.O. box in California. This is important because Valerie didn't want Scientology to know where she was living. Judge Killefer told Valerie's attorney to give Valerie's address to Scientology. That is an order, the judge said. Valerie's quoted here saying, that was disgusting. That was disgusting, Haney said, reading an account of the hearing later and realizing that the judge couldn't be bothered to make sure Haney had someone with her at the arbitration, but did order that she turn over her home address to the church that she had escaped. So she gave her address to the attorney who had to give it to Scientology. Now Valerie is facing the idea of going alone into an arbitration set up by Scientology. There's no more fighting, really. We just need to get it done and bring it back to the court. For now, she awaits word from Scientology about when and where the arbitration will take place. It's the worst thing you could probably have a victim do. Someone who's been abused her entire life to go back into the abusive environment with the abusers. It's appalling. It's absolutely disgusting. It's so crazy. That's the update, you guys. It's not pretty. It's not pretty. I'm dying to know who Scientology picked for the arbitration. I am really hoping it is Greta Van Susteren's husband, John P. Cole. He's actually an attorney. One of the reasons I think it would be so amazing if it was him is that once Valerie undergoes this horribly ridiculous and unfair and abusive process, she will be going back to the court with her attorney to argue about how ridiculous and unfair the process was. It's going to be hard. I don't know how she's going to make that claim without any documentation of the proceedings, but she's going to have to do it. And I just think it adds an interesting component to this when one of the people participating in and facilitating this incredibly unjust process is himself an attorney. I think that adds an absurd component to this thing that, if I'm thinking about it correctly, just really makes Scientology look even worse. That even their own member who's an attorney would be participating in a process that is so obviously unjust. Because, I mean, I don't want to assume everybody already knows what I'm talking about. Scientologists who are in good standing consider former Scientologists who have been declared suppressive persons to be enemies of Scientology, enemies of mankind. Doing anything to help or assist a suppressive person in Scientology is considered a suppressive act. The Scientologists serving as arbitrators on Valerie's arbitration panel, as a matter of Scientology policy, are not allowed to find in Valerie's favor. This is not an arbitration in any legal sense of the word. It's a religious ritual. And Scientology has gotten the courts to enforce their contracts. They want the courts to uphold the enforceability of their contracts while precluding the courts from determining whether the contracts themselves are in conformity with contract law. Contracts it has to be a quid pro quo. It cannot be just totally one-sided. And the courts have said they are literally not even allowed to determine whether the language in Scientology's contracts are fair, because that would require them to interpret Scientology policy. In other words, when the contract says it has to be a Scientologist in good standing to serve on the arbitration panel, the court's not allowed to determine whether it's fair for the arbitrators to be Scientologists in good standing. Because for them to do that would require them to interpret Scientology's policy, aka religious scripture. It's totally freaking insane. And yet that's where we are. Despite all this, I still have hopes that the Baxter Paris lawsuit against Scientology will be allowed to move forward in the courts instead of being forced into arbitration. We may hear back on that any week now. That's the update. That's the insanity. Let me tackle the super chats before I wrap this one up. Okay, broken dishes. Freaking Captain Keebler. Yep, Captain Keebler over here. Thank you, broken dishes. Thank you for the super chat. Let me find the next one. I did see another one. Okay, Care for JC YT. This judge seems biased towards Scientology. Any evidence? I know it seems like that. There have been other decisions in this case that did not in this suit that did not seem that way. There have been other judges in other cases that also seemed to really be understanding the former Scientologist side of the argument. And then when it came time to come down with a decision, they argued in Scientology's favor. And I know it's very easy for me to say here, oh, the judges seem stupid. The judges seem biased. The judges don't get it. These judges aren't dumb people. look, this is why it's so important to get Scientology's tax exempt status revoked. If Scientology's tax exempt status revoked, it would not be able to hide behind this cloak of religious protection that they have, that they enjoy because of the type of tax exemption and the recognition they have from the IRS. So I do not think that this judge is personally biased towards Scientology. I just think that in some ways her hands are tied, and we're going to have to see what happens. Thank you for the super chat. Gia Falcone. If Scientology records the arbitration, can't that recording be subpoenaed as evidence, or is that not possible in a civil case? Well, Gia, I'm not an attorney. I'm just someone who grew up in a cult, so I can only offer you my opinion. I think Scientology could provide the recording if they choose to. I do not think they can be required to. I mean, in fact, that's kind of what the judge has said here is, I don't know the rules Scientology has set, and I don't make them, and it doesn't matter because it's out of my hands. Whatever they say are the rules are the rules. That's literally what the judge has said. Whatever Scientology says are the rules are the rules. It has nothing to do with the court at all. So the judge didn't even order Scientology to make a recording so that she could determine if it was a fair process. No, not at all. She said, I don't know the rules. Not my business. What is it? Not my monkeys, not my circus. It's incredible. Thank you for the super chat, Gia. I appreciate it. Sweet Lady's videos sounds to me from the beginning that this judge is in Scientology's pocket, or should I say the elf's pants? Well, thank you for the super chat, Sweet Lady. Again, I really don't think there's a personal bias towards Scientology. It's just where the courts are at. Dave Owens, could a guy like Mike Rinder file an amicus brief? Dave, I think Mike has done that in several Scientology cases. He may have even done it already in this case. I don't actually recall. No, in fact, I do recall. Scientology is actually so furious about one of the briefs, and I don't know if it was an amicus brief or if it was called something else, but Scientology is so furious with one of the written responses, the affidavits that Mike submitted in this case, that it has asked for sanctions against Valerie's lawyer for even permitting it. In fact, that's a video that I have to do that I haven't done. Scientology has asked the court to sanction Graham Barry $140,000 for the affidavits that were submitted, that Scientology is saying, oh, it was just such a waste of time. It was obviously false. It was declarations from known, proven apostates and liars, and it was a waste of our time. And their waste that literally Valerie's attorneys are wasting Scientology's money by requiring Scientology's attorneys to needlessly respond to these horrible affidavits, one of which was from Mike Rinder. Can you believe that shit? Literally asking for $140,000 of sanctions against Graham Barry. I'm sure that'll be thrown out, but that is how insane these guys are. All right, that is all we have on this. There might be one more video I'm going to do tonight before 7 o'clock, Mondays with Mike and Mark. Not sure, but either way, guys, stay tuned for what's coming later. And thanks for hanging in there and watching until the very end. I'll talk to you guys soon.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe right here. Bye.